Hey, I'd like to talk to you today about a public health issue that I feel we're lacking the proper tools to really deal with. Before I get into that, let's go have a little backstory here. So, in 12 years of training for soccer and in three half marathons, I have developed a love-hate relationship with running. The medals are awesome, and you support these great causes, and you build this a really intense community with other runners, but it hurts. One misstep, you're in a boot, you've sprained your ankle, sheared your tendon, dislocated a bone, or have a stress fracture. This is my actual setup after one time I was running with a friend as we were training for a half marathon. And yes, I took a faulty step, injured myself, and how I ended up in a boot with all of those injuries at the same time. So when that happened, I had a friend with me, like I said, and she saw the injury. She knew that I needed care. She immediately got me treatment and she encouraged me through my physical therapy process and really helped me toward my healing. Now, if during that time when I had gotten injured, if she had just handed me a carton of ice cream and a bottle of essential oils and said, "You're fine, you're overreacting, walk it off. Everybody gets hurt. Everybody goes through this. It's all in your head." Well, obviously, I wouldn't have been able to recover very well, and I wouldn't have been able to get back into living my normal life. All that to say is we're treating our physical wounds with care. So why are we treating our mental illnesses as if they're imaginary or exaggerated or as a sign of weakness? What we need to understand is that mental health issues like depression and anxiety are the fastest growing epidemic in the country. We can remove the stigma surrounding this topic by making conversations about our mental health a part of our normal life. Mental health issues affect everyone in our communities, and there are resources available to be helping one another. Now, although we tend to live in a very individual society, we have to understand that these issues do affect one another because we are a community. And by Merriam-Webster's definition, that's a unified body of individuals such as the people with common interests living in a particular area. Something that happens in one person's home doesn't just stay there. It carries over into their workplace or into their schools. And as you'll see by some of the issues that we're struggling with, our lives are very much connected with one another. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk says, "My humanity is inextricably tied up in yours." And what he means by that is true healing is impossible without recognition of our common humanity and our common destiny. These aren't issues that any one person faces alone, but as we'll see in these statistics, I'm going to show you that we all have someone that either ourselves or someone we know is struggling with a mental health issue that needs to be addressed, needs to be talked about, and needs to be made known that these things don't happen in a bubble. So some of the statistics that I found according to the CDC from their 2020 survey, was that counseling was for over 20% of adults receive mental health treatment. 25% of women were willing to receive counseling, whereas only 14% of men were. And when it came to medications, 21% of women compared to only 11% of men. Unfortunately, our society really tells men that they have to be strong and that they have to do things on their own. Another interesting statistic was that in urban and lower socioeconomic status areas, they reported lower cases of treatment despite comparable levels of counseling. So people were still going and receiving counseling, but they weren't following up with the medical treatments that they needed for whatever reason. Now, the second leading cause of death in the United States is suicide, and that's from ages 10 to 34. We're seeing rates of suicide get younger and younger as we're dealing with pressures from mental health issues as well as issues of bullying, cyberbullying. 46% of those that have been diagnosed, 46% of those that have committed suicide were diagnosed with a mental health condition, and 90% had experienced symptoms but were not diagnosed. Unfortunately, the LGBTQ community is 4 times more likely to die by suicide. Now, according to the Jackson State Community College website, approximately 1,100 college students die by suicide every year. On top of that, you have an additional 6% of college students report that they have seriously considered suicide over the past 12 months. 90% of those have created a suicide plan. 14% have actually attempted suicide. In addition, 60% of those have continued to have thoughts of suicide. Again, this isn't something that is isolated. It's affecting more people than you know, and it is probably affecting more people in your own circle. You just don't realize. Another issue is self-medicating. We're seeing an increase of substance use disorder. 18% of US adults also have a substance use disorder, and 1 in 8 emergency room visits are related to substance use. Now, 15% of adolescents and young adults with mental health issues also report excessive drinking as a coping mechanism. They're not receiving the treatment that they need because they fear the judgment that comes and the stigma from being diagnosed with a mental health disorder. So they turn to drugs and alcohol to cope with obsessive compulsive disorder, attention deficit disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and a variety of other issues. So what can we do? Well, I propose that we can be an advocate, we can be available, and we can be aware. And here's what I suggest. In being an advocate, what I ask is that you speak out on behalf of mental health issues. Educate yourself and others on how common mental health issues are, and avoid perpetuating stereotypes by making an effort to use bias-free language. For example, it's not referred anymore as a substance abuse, but rather substance use disorder, because we want to recognize that if someone is struggling with something and that not that they are personally making a choice to abuse an issue. Be available. Try to make sure that you're intentional with your conversations with others. Don't assume that people are just fine if they're playing it off. And a lot of times we'll see that they hide it under a veil of humor and sarcasm. Also, make sure that we're really listening. Find out what's on someone's mind. Recognize that if they've come to the place where they're willing to talk to you, it's taken a lot of trust and a lot of courage for them to reach this step. So really make sure you're active in your listening and check in with them. Don't let it be a one and done situation. Check in, follow up, especially if you've noticed that they've become distant or detached. Be aware. Pay attention to drastic changes in their behavior, making repeated references to giving up, not being able to go on, not sure how much longer they can continue. Look for signs of isolation, substance use disorder, or talking of harming themselves or someone else. And one of the greatest things we can do is recognize that whether it's yourself or someone you know, you're not able to fight these battles alone. And that asking for help is always the right choice. So whether you need to go seek help for yourself or you have someone in your life that needs further assistance and you're not sure what to do, it's always a great idea to reach out and get other help. And a few of the resources that we have available are the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. It's available 24 hours by phone. You can call, you can text, and there's always someone that's going to be on the other line to walk you through if you're feeling like you might be ready to hurt yourself or someone else. Another addition to that is the Veterans Crisis Line. Now, we're seeing statistics that say 22 veterans a day are committing suicide due to the effects of post-traumatic stress disorder. And most of them are more comfortable speaking with other veterans who have walked in their shoes and have experienced the combat situations that they have. So the Veterans Crisis Line is available for the same scenarios. Jackson State Community College is also offering counseling services by either calling or emailing one of their on-campus counselors. But another thing that they've also done in the community is affiliated with Pathways Behavioral Health, Carey Counseling, and Quinco Mental Health. And you can find out on their website ways that they've helped arrange payment plans to make it more affordable for the Jackson State campus, the Jackson State College students. For anyone who might be interested in biblical counseling, there are also great church-affiliated counseling centers too here in the Jackson area. Specifically, you can check out the Gathering Place at Northbrook, Hope Christian Counseling, the Re-Envision Counseling Center for, again, a more biblical approach to counseling, because these things don't happen just outside of churches. They happen everywhere, and the conversations need to be happening everywhere as well. What do we really want to take away from this is to think of it this way. If a person has diabetes or they have a heart condition and they need insulin or they need some type of medication to deal with the chemical imbalance that they're struggling with, you wouldn't think of that person as less than for having to rely on a medication to help deal with their chemical imbalances. So why is it that when a person is having a mental health issue and they require medication to treat their chemical imbalance, we treat them as though they are less than? We need to understand that our physical health and our mental health go hand in hand, and we really need to start accepting to treat one as equal as the other. Please remember that it's always worth, if you suspect that someone might be going through something, or if you yourself are going through a struggle with mental health issues, it's always worth making a call or sending a text message to reach out, check in on your friends and family, ask if they're okay. and be open and honest about what's on your mind. Let's make these conversations a normal part of our everyday lives so that people recognize that they're not alone. There are resources available and that we are a community that is reaching out to help one another. Thank you.